Juan Carlos, welcome to the show. Doing great, man. Do people call you Juan, Carlos? Is it both?
Yeah, Carlos works, man. Carlos works.
Carlos? Cool. My older
Yeah,
brother's name's
yeah.
Carlos.
Oh, right on, right on.
Familiar with it. Love that name too. So tell me, man, where you from? A little bit about your story just to warm people up.
Yeah, so my name's Juan Carlos. I'm from California, man. I was born and raised in the IE, Inland Empire, about an hour and a half east of LA. Um, what can I tell you? I'm 31 years old, single father to a 9-year-old boy. I am currently working now as a project manager. I've been in the electrical trade for the last 11 years. I'm the founder of the Modern Macho, and yeah, man, just here on a journey, man, doing what I can to encourage, to share my story, to document fatherhood, to document really challenging masculinity from what I saw growing up, challenging machismo, right? I think just one conversation at a time, and so being able to build this community with other men that are on the same boat about it it's been an incredible journey.
Love the name too, by the way. Modern Macho. I hope you trademark that and really like brand the hell out of it. I don't know if you have merch, but it's a great name. And I grew up in El Paso, a border town, and it's where you have double consciousness. It's where you are familiar with your roots and the American ways. And I moved around a bit too, so it's been such an awakening journey for a Latino that only another Latino would understand. Tell me about your upbringing and where your parents are from and how that played a part into the modern macho.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate you asking that. I resonate a lot with that, the moving around, and I think adapting and the culture shocks that come with that. My parents are from Mexico City, first generation, so Spanish was my first language. I'm the oldest of three, and I spent a year actually in Utah, which was to your point, right? I mean, it was a predominantly white area, and
Yeah.
it was a blessing and a curse. I think looking back, it it kind of forced me to adapt to an environment that I was really unfamiliar with. Right, I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, and so to go from it's Moreno Valley, right? To go from Moreno Valley and then head out there was very different. And one of the beauties of it is like being able to push through that and acknowledge that we all kind of want the same things. Like finding the yeses within that was very very beautiful. I did grow up in a home with a lot of adversity, right? You think of your old school traditional like machismo household there, and where my mom served the plates for us. My mom, they do the cooking, right? They do the cleaning. The men don't do that in the house. The men are just men. Um, and so it became a very confusing thing for me because when I graduated high school, I was going into college. I was really just going just to go. I wanted to get my parents off my case. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to go to school. But I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. And it was a very difficult time. I ended up getting into the electrical trade, and not long from getting into the trade, I found out that I was going to be a father. I was 20 years old at the time, and growing up, my dad would always say, like, el que tiene hijos cuando está joven es un pendejo, right? Like, whoever has a kids when they're young is basically an idiot, right? Like, they've ruined their whole life kind of thing. And so, um, sadly, right, but I like that, that was fed into my brain since I was a kid. And so for me, naturally, when I'm told, or when I found out I was going to be a dad, my first thought is, I'm a fucking idiot. Like my life is over. And, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the support to understand that. The fear behind that was valid, right? How to embrace that, how to channel all that, how to be grounded with that so that I can show up in a better way for myself and for the folks around me. So it took me down a very dark road. A lot of alcohol was involved, a lot of drugs were involved, right? And one of the things that also made it very difficult for me is that I was in the trade, I was working hard, sometimes even showing up under the influence, but it was like I was still showing up. And so in my world, you're a man. I also have very thick skin. Like talking shit was one of the things that I enjoyed doing all the time. And so it's like I'm doing the things that I was supposed to do, yet for some reason, I still didn't feel like I was a man. I had never been in a fight. To this day, I've actually never been in a fight. But at that time, like I think that was what my focus was at 20 years old is how do I figure out a way to get in a fight to have essentially my rite of passage, right? Like now you're a man, I'm like I don't have the facial hair, I weigh a buck 40 at the time. I'm like there's just you don't have any manly features. What is it going to take? And so, um, yeah, man, it was really tough. A lot of these cycles of filling voids and in spaces that really weren't healthy for me, right? Being very promiscuous too, cheating on partners, doing a lot of these things again that were filling voids that I was very lost on, no support, no tools, and eventually deciding to go to therapy. And that was very difficult, dude, because that's not something that I grew up with. Like that's to me at that time, that's for crazy folks. Like you only go if you quote unquote really have a problem, right? Um, and also not only do you really have a problem, but that also means that you're incapable of handling your own stuff, which further reinforces this idea that I'm not a man and that I'm not man enough because look at you gave up. Now you went and you showed up to a therapist, and so that was very conflicting. It was very hard. The process of therapy was also very difficult because the first time I went to therapy, um, I was asked, "How do you feel from 1 to 10?" And here I am, bro, at 25 now, and I'm going from talking smack on the job site, drinking, and you know, essentially even talking smack to other men, right? Like I've been guilty of that, about being vulnerable and things like that, and embracing your feelings. And then here I go, and I'm being asked this question of how I feel from 1 to 10, and I'm like, dude, this is not for me. Like we are not doing this. And so that was tough to push through. And what really drove a lot of that was not only just the failed relationships, but also I think the relationship that I was starting to build with my son, because I was noticing a lot of the things in which that I was brought up, because those were the only tools that I had. There was a lot of yelling, there was spanking involved. There's a lot of these things that I felt guilty about, but I didn't know any other way. And at the time, I had a very binary way of thinking, which is I either incorporate what I thought was discipline and like put my foot down with my son, or I let him do whatever the heck he wants. So if you ask me which one I'm going to lean towards, well, it's going to be the one that has structure, quote unquote structure, in what I thought at the time, right? And I started seeing a lot of myself in my son, dude, like just the anxiety, like noticing that there was more control than influence when I was with him, how much afraid he was of me, and how much I wasn't connecting with my son, and that sucked. That sucked, and just being really hurt about that. And yeah, man, like I said, started with therapy. And so then that's what kind of drove me to start the platform, because then I started going to therapy and I'm like, well, there's no way I'm the only one going through this. And so we started a podcast, which turned into us putting in events together, doing pool tournaments, and then using the funds to sponsor men to go to therapy. Started a book club where we were all just reading together. And the pandemic was like a big part of this too. So it's like now we're just virtually all linking up, and hey, you're going through the same stuff. And what's been cool for me is being able to focus a lot more on how I'm feeling, uh, and seeing how much that helps me connect with other folks, right? Because, dude, I have my own story, right? Like everyone does, and that's a beautiful thing. No two stories are going to be exactly the same. So if I was to ask, like, have you ever had this specific experience? Nobody's going to raise their hand, right? But I know that if I focus, and if we focus on being able to say, like, dude, I felt alone. I felt hurt. I felt angry. I felt sad. It's like, whoa, now we're getting somewhere, right? So it's been a lot of practice, a lot of breaking cycles, a lot of boundaries that have had to be set. One of the first time I started therapy, I actually had to take a step back from even my family for a little bit. Like I was lying to my family about therapy, and I was telling them that I was doing side jobs, and how sad, right? Like how sad that I did not even feel comfortable with my own family to be able to tell them. And I don't blame them, right? Because they didn't have the tools to also hold space for me. I can't blame them for something that they didn't know. Um, but yeah, man, that's been being able to focus on filling my own cup now, and seeing how that just pours over into my son, into my family, into my friends, into my community, even just the random brother that I run into at the store, right? And it's all just because of how much I'm able to fill my own cup. It's taken a lot to get here. It's a never-ending journey. I continue to learn every single day. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's been cool, man. I don't think there's enough representation as Latinos, as men. Like it's hard, right? Like I always told myself, and I was very guilty of being like, oh, that's a white people thing. That's a white people thing. And I end up doing what I also do now too is I volunteer with the Nurturing Fathers program with the county, and like half these dudes are white. And I was wrong. You know what I mean? Like I was wrong. I'm like, damn, man, like these dudes went through some shit too. Like that's not fair that I have my own bias that has said that a white thing is a healthy thing, and it's like, nah, bro, healthy is healthy, unhealthy is unhealthy. Like it looks like very many different shapes and sizes, and I have to hold myself accountable into my beliefs and how I subscribe to them, and how I need to start reframing a lot of this thinking for myself.
Love it, man. Thank you for that story, and it does give a good arc to where you are today now, and a lot of relatability. And this is really why I wanted to have you on because most of my past guests, for the exception of maybe one or so, has been just white people. But
Mm,
that is because the groups that I'm plugging in that I have found so far are 80%, maybe 90% white people. And let me answer the question why. You said we were underrepresented, and I think that's a fact. I don't know what the stats are, but this is why it's so important for anybody with a little bit of some melanin and above, because I know that I'm still lighter on the spectrum. Even though I think that I'm darker, that's a whole conversation on its own. But there's a crabs in a bucket syndrome going on with anybody from a developing country that, sorry about that,
it's all good.
anybody
It's all
from a
good.
developing country, which is what I'm going to call Mexico and Latino America, still developing in social and emotional and different things. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule. I'm not saying 100% of everybody, but there's correlations with lower income, less education, broken families, generational curses. It's a sad thing, but that's the birth of the Latino, the indigenous, and the European. It's a bloody, ugly history, and waking up to this is what people like you and me along the journey find similarities. When I was a kid, um, I went to a school where white people hung out with white people and Mexicans with Mexicans.
Mm,
And unfortunately, almost all the Mexicans were, and this is in Georgetown, north of Austin, Texas, where I went to middle school. The wealthy people were white and the poor people were brown for the 80% of the majority. And I, being a shy kid, just knew in the school, went with the Mexicans, the Latinos. And I played soccer and I was on the team, but I also had like a little bit of a cholo phase. And, I was wearing South Pole and Echo and Sean John and stuff like that. And, you have that little street to you growing up, like on the streets. And, but then you start, I felt out of place. Like, thank God I have at least an educated stepdad and a who's mostly absent completely, but at
mm.
least he was educated, military stuff like that. And my mom was also supportive, and that helped me start leveling up because I decided I need to get better quality friends. Once I realized I didn't want to go to jail and things like that, I'm like, I need to get some better friends. And it's unfortunate that I had to distance myself. And then I started having to decolonize my mind. I'm like, okay, I wanted it to be white, essentially. I almost was
Mm.
disowning my brownness and my culture. And part of the waking up journey, I was like, okay, well, who am I really? So, what we're talking about in becoming a man is really individuating, being your own person, knowing what you are, who you are, and whose you are. And all of these are really powerful ideas for the person listening to say, ooh, let me look more into that. Or that's resonating maybe. Because all these are avenues that are going to lead down to the same path, which is knowing yourself, loving yourself, and that whole process of healing that will lead to growth and that will lead to better association and harmony, regardless of color, regardless of gender, regardless of any difference that divides us, which is based off of fear and lies.
Bro, so much good gems in there. Yes, man. I think there's a lot of reflecting there that I think that is huge to be able to validate, right? Like, because I think all those parts contribute to the way that we try to move our own puzzle piece, right? And one of the things that I found early on when I started the platform was like, oh, there's this man box, right, which I was trying to shy away from. And so a lot of my work in the very beginning was like I basically created a space that I was looking for, to your point. And so with that, it was like, okay, well, what does that man look like? And then as I'm learning, I'm like, bruh, this is wrong too. Like, just because you're creating, yes, this man box that you're creating is like this better man, but you're still creating a fucking box. This isn't about living a liberating life of what it looks like for you or what it looks like for me. It's, you're still saying this is what we need to do, and you're essentially still trying to tell people how to do it. And I think it's valid. I know for me, man, I'll speak in there was a lot of fear. There was lack of knowledge. And so I think I know that I made a lot of assumptions based off of things I didn't know. And that's where even my own ignorance of just being like, oh, that's a white people thing, and then realizing that it's like, okay, it's not necessarily a white people thing, because some of your white friends are having it harder than you are. Right. And also acknowledging, like you said, though, that one thing I really like is intersectionality, right? Which is being able to understand our privileges based on our social status, based on our gender, based on our race, based on, like all these parts that, like, yeah, I'm also not saying that, like you said, we're underrepresented. Like the numbers are also there. And I think we all have our privileges in our own ways, which has been cool, because I know that for me as a man, like, I have a responsibility to know what these privileges are. I might not move in the world with these puzzle pieces and taking advantage of them, right? But it's important that I understand the privileges that I have as a man, right? And we've kind of touched a little bit about these conversations about masculinity, but it was tough for me to do when I was younger, right? Like, even just the concept of, like, for example, seeing like women empowerment kind of things, right? Dude, it was triggering as fuck for me when I was younger, right? Like women that were just like, hey, we want to love each other. And I was like, oh my God, right? And it was triggering. It was so triggering for me, man. And like, so that's why when I see the boys and I see, guys that are upset about it, I'm like, dude, I see you, I hear you. And so to your point, the more we know, right, is like, cultural awareness is a big piece of that. I think cultural awareness is because it's understanding where's that coming from. And so then I do some more digging and I'm like, bro, of course I was mad. For the last 30 years, I've been told, right, that if I get a good job, that if I get a good career, that if I make good money, then I will be loved. Until then, I won't be accepted. I have to do that first in order for me to be seen, valued, and loved. So now I've spent the last 30 years of my life trying to figure out how to do that. And now, I see this woman who's like, oh, I want to empower myself. And it's like, of course it's triggering, because I've been sold a lie. And so what I always say is, like, there's a yes in everything. I hold on to that anger. The difference is that's not her fault, right? It's this bigger issue around the patriarchy, around machismo, around this lie that we've been sold that says, hey, this is how you're supposed to be. That's what I'm really upset about. And so I think that's what makes me very passionate about this kind of work and being able to link up with men like you, because the reality is like, we kind of all got screwed by this, And what's been beautiful, dude, is it's been really healing to have conversations with women and sharing how it's affected me and how it's affected them. And it's like, bro, we're both getting screwed here. You're trying to figure out how to get loved in the way you were told you were supposed to, and I'm doing it too. We're not living this authentic life, and now we're mad, but like somehow we're trying to date each other. How is it, like all these questions that get brought up. And so I think it's been very beautiful too, to go into conversations with an open heart, with an open mind, and showing up authentically, right? Like being able to come forward and be like, hey, in a time where I think we've all been kind of held accountable from a place of shame, it's hard to speak up about these things, right? And trying to reframe that to where we're coming at each other from a place of compassion, right? And then when I say, hey, look, I didn't grow up and say like, hey, I want to be a man. Like I want to, like treat me this way because this is what I want. I wasn't like that wasn't my choice. Now, did I make a choice to subscribe to those things? Absolutely. Is that my responsibility? Absolutely. Right? And so I'm out here doing the work, trying to figure this out for myself, trying to break all this down so I can rebuild it. And I mean, a big part of that's where this name, the Modern Macho, came from. Is like the first step was acknowledging, like, no, this is who you are, right? Because I told myself, like, this guy that's just angry, that's cheating, that's drinking all the time, that's driving home like this isn't who I really am. I'm a really nice guy deep inside. Like, this really. I just had to look in the mirror one day and I was like, bro, this is who you are. And the sooner you start acknowledging that, the sooner we can take a step forward, right? Um, and so coming together, especially as Latino men, like, dude, we've had to move our puzzle pieces a little differently, right? And that's not to discredit anybody else's, but it's like we're able to resonate with each other. We're able to further empathize with one another, right? Because I think sometimes I know I tried to sympathize, which is like I'm trying to feel what you're feeling, and it's like I don't, right? Like when my son is trying to plug in his like iPad or something, and he's freaking out about it. I'm like, I can't sympathize with that, bro. Like, I don't freak out about shit like that, right? But then now being able to have empathy, which is just putting myself in his shoes, and I'm like, damn, that frustration that he's feeling right now, I've been there. I'm like, dang, okay. Does that mean that we're just gonna let it happen? No, but I can help and hold space in a different way because I can put myself in your shoes now.
I love how you brought it back into parenting because I know you said you have a 9-year-old son. What's his name?
Julian, shout
Julian.
out to my boy Julian. Yeah, yeah.
Julian. Yeah, man. Nothing more serious than raising another kid or another child. I have a niece and a nephew, and the relationship for a Latino man with kids is what I've seen. The better emotionally you get, the closer you're going to be to the kids.
Mm,
Because I love with this one guy locally, his name's Garen Jones, and he says that we essentially an adult is just a degenerated child, like a someone who lost that childlike spark, and you see it all the time where they're moving so fast, they're just trying to run from their lives, drowning in work or avoiding everything, and they don't really actually slow down until it's too late when they're like 65 years old. Then they start caring about the little things and going on little walks or just doing the simple things and just being present. But yeah, I feel like I was detached from little kids growing up. You look at a lot of 18, 21-year-old guys, especially if they're college students, probably not spending time with kids. They're, you know, out
sure.
there trying to just
Hmm.
be in the
Hmm.
world. But the more you heal that inner child, the more you can be a kid with your kid. Of course, responsibility and maturity and all those great things too. But, you know, for the people that are maybe young parents and maybe had a kid too early, hopefully this is helping and speaking to you because it's not going to happen by accident. It being maturity and growth is not going to happen by accident. One of the biggest things that are essential to be where we're at, which I'm very grateful that we've done the work. Like my life is so much better in every way. The main ingredient is humility, being humble
Mm,
enough to ask for help. It takes like unfortunately a dumb ego to be like I could do it myself. I got my own therapy.
yeah.
And I'm not taking away the gym or meditation or yoga or like I'm not taking away people's inner peace practices, going for runs or whatever. Like all those things help and are good, but there's nothing like a book on emotions or PTSD or you know gaslighting or narcissism. Like there's nothing like an actual therapist who's certified to be having conversations with you or even paying for a coach that's specialized in some area.
Mm,
That's the kind of help I'm talking about that costs money and time. That's the kind of
yeah.
help that is really only adequate enough to deal with some of these deep, serious issues that are tough, like emotional abandonment, right? Most parents were not emotionally equipped to raise kids, and that affects you in almost every me and anybody else listening. It affects you in every single area of your life. It determines how much money you're going to make, how much you believe you want to make. determines the kind of love and relationships with your parents and your loved ones and everybody around you. It honestly, I haven't read this book yet, but from Gabor Mate, who titled it "The Myth of Normal," because there is no
Mm,
such thing.
mm,
Everybody is really hurting inside because it's okay to hurt. I think the problem is most men numb the pain, and you're mentioning women, they don't numb the pain. I don't think they're, some do, of course, there's exceptions to everything, but they feel it, especially once a month. That keeps them awake. Pain is our biggest friend and teacher. And I encourage anybody listening to really lean into the pain to push you to action and asking for help. Because a lot of
yeah,
times people soften it up and it doesn't hurt that bad, or they're just going through the motions, but then a tragedy happens. And then it's you
sure.
waited too long. You waited too long. And so to recognize that early, and I'm saying it the way I want to receive it myself, so someone can really take some action, ask for help.
Yeah, man. So many good things there. Yeah, I think, and I think it's all so valid, right? Like, I really want to validate every single one of those points that you made because I think like a big part too, like asking for help, going out there, and I think a lot of us struggle with that. And I think to validate that is like at some point we probably did, and we weren't helped, or we got fucked over, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
valid. Like this is why we struggle with it. And to your point, this is where some of this therapy starts coming in because there's like the body keeps score, right? Like there's another one. I think it's I can't remember her last name, but it was either Lauren or Lindsay. The book's called the Adult Children of Emotionally Mature Parents.
Yeah.
That one,
I
oh
got a
fuck
few.
yeah,
My,
bro.
my, my wife put me
Oh,
on it.
bro,
I have
dude,
I
that
stuck
one,
right here.
my gosh, bro. When I read that, that shit was like, what? That's a very eye-opening book. And I always say like, there's a lot of things that are therapeutic that are good. I mean, even having support groups, right, and these support systems, like it's all therapeutic. Those things are good, and it's just important to understand, like, it's not therapy, right? Like, therapy is therapy, right? It's just like, hey, do you play soccer? Well, I went for a run this morning. Okay, that was good. But did you play soccer? Oh, no, no. Well, it's because I like to play football. Okay, that's good. But did you play? You know what I mean? Like, it's like as much as we. And then here's the thing, man. Is especially I'll use breath work as an example. Breath work has been a game
Yeah.
changer for me to regulate myself because for me, like my biggest thing is dancing and soccer, right? Bruh, there are times where I'm at work. Right? Like I can't just like, hey guys, hang tight. I'm gonna go play a quick round of soccer. I'll be back. Or like, hang tight, let me go hit the weights, I'll be back. Like sometimes you need a tool on the spot. And we literally carry it with us all the time, right? And and I think giving ourselves a lot of grace too, because to any brother that's listening that's probably like spinning the reels on everything we're throwing at them right now is like, who taught you this? Before this moment that you're reflecting, who taught you this? Who modeled this for you? Who showed you what this looked like? Right? So if you can't think of someone or if you're struggling to put those pieces together or maybe what that looked like for you growing up, hey man, of course, right? I think, and that's I think sometimes the part where I do feel that as men sometimes we're not given enough love, man, right? I don't think we're looking for someone to justify our actions, but sometimes I think that empathy piece is missing. Like, who showed us how to be vulnerable? Who showed us how to be emotionally intelligent? Who showed us how to use these tools? And bro, we out here we out here putting in the work. We're out here like, yo, I'm gonna break these cycles. I'm gonna do what I can with what I got, and I'm gonna push that a little further. That doesn't mean that what I'm doing is okay. That doesn't justify my actions, but I think it changes the approach in a little bit of how we tackle some of this stuff, right? Looking at our parents, I think that's what I think is the most important part is really just a lot of self-reflection into the type of men that we want to be. Like, what does that look like for us, right? What do we value, and what do we value compared to where do we spend most of our time? Because I thought I valued family, but I spent all my time at work. So do I really value family? Right? And like just all these things that I had to reflect for myself of like, oh shit, this is where I'm at. And it's no longer about how people are projecting onto me, but the kind of man that I want to show up as for me and for myself, right? And so I think a lot of it's projections, right? And you're right, we're grown ass boys, bro. We're literally just grown ass boys trying to figure it out with the tools that we've been given. Um, and yeah, I think it's beautiful. For me, it's always like an honor to be able to hold space for other men, to resonate, to learn too. Um, I think that that's like a big part of it, especially now as a father, knowing that my kid tells me he loves me because he chooses to, not because I'm forcing it onto him. Like that's so new. I didn't think that was possible. You know, I'll be completely transparent with you and say that when I found out I was going to be a dad, I didn't know my son's mom for long, and I questioned even having my son. And to think that that's where I was because I did not know how to embrace my fear. That was such a valid fear. Like it's such a huge responsibility. And so I just wanted to avoid. And now looking at the level of relationship that I have with my kid, which is not at the cost of our connection, is like, man, it's doable, bro. It's so doable, right? And so um, I'm even just like honoring you and giving you flowers for what you're doing, because we're paving the way for younger versions of ourselves that could have used these conversations, that could have used these kind of tools to say, oh man, what I feel is valid. I don't need to make decisions based off of this. I just need to sit with this for a minute, sit with how I'm feeling. And that's that, you know? And so I'm like, I don't want to wait till my son is in his 30s or 40s to try to rebuild the relationship, right? I know that I had to learn to swim by being thrown in the deep end. And I think a lot of us had to. A lot of us had to, and unfortunately we've lost a lot of brothers along the way. With that being said, I know that I have a privilege of being able to get in the pool now with my kid and swim with him. And I want to take advantage of that as much as I can. And if I can open that door for any other father that's willing to do the same thing, bruh, I know we're down. I know we're down. We just need those doors open for each other, you know?
I love what you're saying, man. It it's so true. The emotional piece, the support, the the caring, the listening, the sacrifice too when it's inconvenient. So anybody listening, I'm not gonna say for you, but reach out if you need to be listened to. If you don't feel like you have anybody to talk to, you can reach out, email, DM, we'll hop on a call or anything. Um, because you matter.
Yeah.
As
Oh
cheesy
yeah,
as
you're
that
some good
sounded,
shit, man.
you
No,
matter.
I know it's real though. Like I think as a community as a whole, I always invite like we can all contribute to this, right? Like, and dude, trust me, when I first started the platform, when I was getting uncomfortable with being vulnerable, I was like, I wanted every man to do it, and I'm like, speak up. Why the fuck are we talking about this? And then I also had to reflect and realize like the conversation every year is speak up. What about the conversation about who's listening, right? Like, men, speak up. Okay, who listens? And so I was invited, like, man, we can all help each other out here, right? Like, I'm gonna do a better job of being vulnerable. I got to do a better job of having communication skills and learning new things that I didn't know. And it's like, how could you know? It's so beautiful to have people reach out and be like, well, how can we help? And it's like, hey, as I'm learning how to communicate, others are learning how to hold space, right? And I'm learning how to hold space for others as well when they're being vulnerable. So yeah, man, I think it's a collective, right? It's definitely not about pointing fingers. It's like, cool, we see what the issue is. How do we come together and really try to show up with love for each other and try to figure out how to, like, what these, right, like healthy levels of conflict, right? What are the needs? What are the needs? Because I know that 9 times out of 10, I never even thought about that, right? Everything was always a win lose. Either you win or like I win. Like someone's gonna win in this conversation, right? And so, and even when I so called let you win, it's like, did you really though? Because now here I am being petty for the rest of the week, even though I'm acting like, oh yeah, it's cool, not a big deal, you know? And so it's like that's all I knew is like either I win or if I don't care about winning, but I'm still holding on to all these feelings. And so asking myself like, what do I need? What do I need right now? Or hey, I wonder what like my son, what does he need? And I'm like, dang, I would spin my wheels trying to solve a problem that not once did I ask, what do you need from me?
Mm.
And I'm also getting mad at him because it's like he's not being grateful, he's not appreciating, and it's like, bro, if I think about it, I've never asked him what he needs. And how was I ever going to know how to do that when I never had that tool? And also, who's asking me, what do you need? You know, asking me to empathize for him, like you said, without ever having that for myself. That's where the therapy, the self love, like really breaking all that stuff down. So, yeah, man, I think it's all very, very valid. It's not easy to do. And so, giving ourselves grace, when we're being courageous and we're stepping outside those comfort zones, or when we're reflecting and realizing who gave us that tool? Nobody. Damn. We're out here trying. Flowers, 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 flowers.
Yeah, man. Thanks for saying all those things too. And hopefully the people that were listening, you know, a lot of times originally this is out of your comfort zone, even hearing them, but nothing like a seed thought that germinates and it really blooms. This is important. And to bring it more macro again, the world needs more strong people that are doing the work, because the weak, by the sheer mass, like the true weak, the true old school machos, by the sheer mass, are influencing policy, still influencing culture, still influencing crime and different things, and a lot of injustice in families. That only way forward is for there to be more leaders, for people to actually be fit to serve. And if you want to see, like, for that macro example, anybody listening, is religions like the Jewish community, or you were in Utah, like the LDS, the Mormon community, some of the wealthiest, most successful groups out there, because I'm spiritual, not religious, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just an example that there's groups of people that are so tight knit, following a system almost, and getting incredible results.
Yeah.
This is our attempt of doing work that can create a system of bringing other people up to one day start being in a lot of positions of power, eventually a president of the United States, and really lifting. There was, I don't know what statistic it was, but unfortunately, this is the fact: African American and Latinos were at the very bottom of the economic,
Mm.
social kind of class. And that's because we really need to have more leaders, more voices, and they're starting to come out there. I want to mention them too, because shout out to Violet, my amazing partner, who has leveled me up so much. She went through university classes with all these subjects. But
Nice.
this one, Children of the Land, Marcelo Hernandez Castillo, is a really great book of a first generation immigrant who really did everything we just described. So it's an incredible story. And then this one, other than the one that we mentioned, it's a big title, so I'll just put it in the description. But this is a emotional leveling up masterpiece.
Mm.
And I will promote these three books because simply most people just don't read. Most people are really just watching TV and kind of numbing out their life away. And people dedicate their whole life to one subject and in one book. And then if you just read that book, I promise you, for anybody listening, that's a great place to start. Other than having good conversations with people that are willing to listen, the person who doesn't read is no better off than the person who cannot read. And I think that's
Mm.
almost like the grassroots levels of self enlightenment.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think there's a lot touched there too. I think there's a lot of layers to a lot of those topics. I know, thinking about Bell Hooks, and I know she mentions, I think it's in All About Love. She talks about like growth coming from a place of adversity and not so much of a place of liberation. So I think that draws a big part too of like when we think of growth, it's like this discomfort. And so I think I have a lot of love for my OGs. I work with all the OGs, like so. I think like being able to see the yes in what these guys are trying to teach us, right, and bridging the gap, like dividing the room does nothing, right, and understanding like even me, bro, like 31. I feel amazing. I feel like I'm in my prime, and yet I step in spaces sometimes at the colleges where I'm like, bruh, I feel so old. And it's cool to be able to realize like everyone here brings value to the table. I mean, just like our kids, dude. Like we could learn so much from each other. I learned
Yep.
so much from my son, and seeing how easy him and his boys just forgive each other and move forward from things and build sustainable friendships with each other. It's like shit that I still struggle with like older friends that I have now, right? Um, and so I think being able to um, I think again, make having that understanding of a lot of times it's easier to disassociate, right? A lot of times it's easier not to pick up books, not to get uncomfortable with certain things because maybe the uncomfortable didn't come from a place of like we don't see it as something that we can invest into ourselves. It's like we've had to get uncomfortable because we were in adverse places, right? Like I said, it's like swimming, dude. When you get thrown in the deep end, you're like, I'd rather not swim. Swimming just sounds like a bad idea, but it's like, hey, if we can get our needs met and uh, we can get in and swim and learn, do it in a fun way where the discomfort is good, it's intentional, it's part of who we want to be for ourselves. Like, why not, right? Like understanding the doors that have been open for us, and some of us have had more doors than others, right? And yeah, man, like I said, I think it really comes down to empathy. Empathy is a big part of it. And I think for all of us to really show up with empathy and to create a space with less judgment and more compassion just requires more self-reflection. Because until I was heard, until I felt seen, I wasn't able to put myself in other people's shoes, right? And I wasn't able to understand even just like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The fuck you can, bro. These dads are out here. I'm telling you, man. These guys are out here, in their 50s and they're down, bro, and they're showing up for their kids in the only way that they know how, right? And when they're asking to be helped, they're not. And so it's like I don't think that we're being set up to fail. I just don't know that we're always being set up to succeed, right? And so it's the four agreements, right? Like it talks about the victim mentality and having a victim mindset, and not so much the mindset, but just being victims. And like I remember reading that for the first time and just being so triggered, bro. I bought my house when I was 20 years old. My ego was off the roof, bro. I'm like, I'm living the American dream. I bought my house, like blah blah. Blah. And you even brought up like success, and even that, like, what does that mean for you? What does that look like for you? Right? Because for me now, like my definition of success has everything to do with the connections around me and nothing to do with what's in my bank account. Right? Like that to me was everything. And I'm like, bro, I just bought my house. I just got into the trade. I'm in the union. Like I'm doing it. I'm making it big. And then I'm looking at this house and it's fucking empty. It's empty. And I think that's when it really clicked that now I'm like, bro, I mean, my son a couple months ago was like, Dad, we're so rich. And I was thrown off because I was like, what? He's like, yeah, like I realized I have so much family and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, God, bro, that's crazy. Like, how cool that he has that kind of mindset already at this age, right? So, yeah, I think very similar to what you mentioned about normal. Like, there is no normal. I was like, I think even what does success look like for you, right? For me, for us, and really getting down to what all these visions and values and beliefs look like for us individually, and then moving accordingly, right? Because if not, you're kind of just moving along, which is what I was doing for a long time. I was just kind of going with the flow and letting the steps dictate what my direction was. When it's like, no, 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 bro, you can put it in the GPS, figure out where you're trying to go. Now, be open to taking some left turns, and maybe the route changes halfway through, right? But I've learned now that like I gotta have a sense of direction, right? What does success look like for me as a father? What are the things that I want to hold on to from the way that I was brought up? What are the things that I want to let go of? And what are new things that I want to bring to the table, right? And then, like I said, for me, it's very important, man. Every 6 months, where was I wrong? Where was I wrong? Where was I wrong? And not to beat myself up, but just to be like, oh, cool, we're learning.
Yeah, I love that self reflection and intentional living, which is
Hmm.
beautiful. Man, Carlos, it's been a pleasure. What projects in closing do you have coming up that you want to promote or for people to look out to?
Yeah, man. So currently, what we do have is they are in person. So if you got any Cali fans out here in the Inland Empire, man, they can send us a DM. We've got social hours. It's a group of men. We're either meeting at coffee shops or breweries, dude, and we're just having conversations, holding space for each other, challenging, reframing some of the ways in which we think, holding space for each other, like I said, and talking a little bit about how we're fighting machismo and the patriarchy, because I think we're doing it already in ways that we don't even realize, right?
Yep.
Like just being able to express ourselves and dance and sing, and it's like it's a simple thing, but believe it or not, you're already advocating for something that like it's groundbreaking, right? We're breaking so many cycles and healing so many generations. So that's the biggest thing we're doing. We had a podcast that we probably will be revamping towards the end of the year, but we have a lot of episodes up that I always encourage men and really just anyone that resonates with the message or maybe wants to get to know a perspective of what a machista's like, which is myself, man. I've had very homophobic beliefs growing up, right? And I was a very homophobic individual. And so we talk to therapists, we talk to social workers, and kind of try to bring them a lighthearted conversation with some knowledge, and also something that is important is like it can be very dehumanizing as a therapist to separate the two, right? So to be able to talk to them, to just see like, bro, they're just people just like us. Just like a coach is good at, running the team, he's got a life outside of that. So do therapists, right? They're humans. They're good at what they do. They have tools, and they're just people. And so I would encourage them to check out the podcast. Speaking engagement opportunities too. Currently, there's some coming up towards the end of the year, but if anybody is interested, I'm always open to that. You can always check us out on the Instagram at the Modern Macho. We have the website too, themodernmacho.com. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, any of the major streaming platforms. And similar to what you said, man, any man that resonates that or that doesn't and thinks some of this stuff is wrong, yo, I'm all ears. Feel free to send an email, send us a DM. Always, always, always listening.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, be part of the conversation. If you disagree or anything, just let's talk it out. Well,
I
it was
love
a
that.
pleasure, Carlos. We'll stay in touch, man.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate you having me, brother. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
All right, man.